And in this country, we have a really weird attitude towards mental health. We have a really weird attitude towards the idea that you should look after your mental health. And when you come to yourself and the reasons why you have traits that objectively, and who can be objective when they're thinking about themselves, objectively you'd rather not have. You have to go back to source. You have to go back to childhood. You have to go back to when these things began. I wish you could hear me 10 years ago. I had a fraction of the listeners that I've got now. So the massive majority of people listening now will not have heard me 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I used to laugh my socks off at this sort of stuff. What a load of bilge. Absolute nonsense. Pull your socks up. Get your head down and get over it. Absolute cobblers. Codswallop, crackerjack. I've got to go and talk to my therapist. I swear to you, I would have been at the front of the queue of people absolutely poo-pooing the idea that talking about your inner child or making contact with the brutalized infant that you used to be would in some way allow you to make enormous changes to your adult life. Unbelievable, really. How different. And I think Harry would have been like that as well, don't you? When he was tooling around the place, behaving like a super entitled little git. It's not his own language, but some of the stories he shares, you know, I think he would have been like that as well. I can't imagine that it would be particularly conducive to being a brilliant soldier, actually, having too much therapy. But my goodness me, after you've been a brilliant soldier, therapy can certainly help you lead a brilliant life. 12 after 11 is the time. So that's the question I've got for you. How would you explain to using Prince Harry, if you want, as an example, but you don't have to, you can use yourself, I will. How would you explain to a skeptic, to someone like I used to be, that therapy is life-changing? And that is why Harry could step back and not try to knock his brother out when his brother wanted a fight, demanded a fight, actually, said, we used to fight a lot. Why can't we? And he just, if I hadn't had that therapy, I would have done it. I'd have made it worse. I'd have allowed my own red mist to descend. So I'll have a crack at explaining my own experiences of this. I've done it in the past, so I won't bore you for ages and ages. But I ended up in therapy for a heap of reasons. I write about it in my last book, soon to be my second last. Well, not soon, but by the end of this year, it'll be my second last book. And I couldn't believe it. So I went to therapy, more in hope than expectation. And the therapist said to me, if this works and if we decide to work together, then at some point in the near future, I will ask you to talk to, let's say, 10-year-old you. We sort of trace back some of the reasons why you are how you are. We'll trace it back to when you were 10, say, or 11 or 12. And I'll ask you. I thought she was bonkers. I remember sitting there trying not to laugh. Literally trying not to laugh. I said, sorry, we're going to do what? And she said, what we'll probably use that cushion over there. And when we're making progress, if we do decide to go ahead with this, then you will talk to that cushion as if it is your 10-year-old self. And I'm just sitting there thinking, yeah, right, lady. Like that's ever going to happen. I'm more likely to have a coffee enema than I am to have a conversation with a cushion about my inner child. And then we had a crack at it. Then we had a go at therapy. And within 2 sessions, it happened. I was talking about being beaten as a kid at school, formally, not the informal beatings, but when you would go and queue up outside your headmaster's study and you'd go in one by one. And the worst bit was that you'd hear your mate getting whacked. You'd hear your mate getting caned. This is going back to the early 1980s. It doesn't happen now. And the effort that you immediately put into pretending that it doesn't hurt is almost impossible to convey. You have to convince yourself that it doesn't hurt. If you don't convince yourself that it doesn't hurt, physically, emotionally, mentally, you are almost proud of it. If you don't convince yourself that you're fine, then you'll fall apart. That's what Harry's talking about when he talks about not crying when his mum died and watching documentaries, trying to teach himself how to cry. He turned himself into an automaton. I am not in pain. I am not vulnerable. I am not fragile. It did not hurt. And what is the bedrock of the British royal family? What's the bedrock of the British class system? All together now? Yeah. The stiff upper lip. What is the opposite of emotional health? The stiff upper lip. So that's what happened to him. I know it happened to him because it happened to me on a much smaller scale. And I'm talking about it, and I'm talking to the woman about being beaten. And she goes, "How old were you again?" I said, "I was 10. And she said, "Well, that must have hurt." And straight away, I start going, "No, it didn't." And for some reason, in that context, at that moment, for the first time ever, you've heard me on the radio, you just seen me on telly 20 years ago talking about why corporal punishment was actually quite good for children. So it's the only language that some kids understand. And how do I know that? Well, I used to be one of them. And for some reason, in that moment, she said, "That must have really hurt." And I went, yeah, it really did. I mean, it really, I was 10, you know. I was tiny. He was 6'3" and he had a special tool designed for hitting children with. And I just stopped right there. And she did it immediately. She turned, she goes, "Tell him now." And points at this bloody cushion on a sofa. I'm supposed to talk to the cushion. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. I remember 10 years ago, I'd have been laughing my socks off at the idea of therapy being good for people. And she said this thing that I'll never forget. She said, "Tell him he's all right now. Tell him that you will look after him. Understand this, you understand Prince Harry. All of it. Even if he's getting on your nerves, even if you don't understand why he's doing what he's doing, even if you think he's gone too far or he shouldn't have done this, but you understand why he did that. Understand this and you will understand Prince Harry." You turn to your brutalized 10, 11, 12-year-old self and you say, "I will look after you now." Because when you needed looking after, nobody looked after you. They made you walk behind that coffin. They made you pretend that you were okay. They made you strap on that stiff upper lip every day of your life. Tell him now that you will look after him. And that is what Prince Harry is doing. Prince Harry is looking after the little boy that he used to be. Why? Because nobody else did.